my review of Trials of Azra. It's a game that features necromancy, and I gotta say, I find that super relatable. As you all may know, I've resurrected many dead things to do my bidding. Well, mostly old-ass game consoles, but it's a similar feeling of seeing the dead walking again, so I'm going in with some experience at least. I'll be sure to put that on my resume. Trials of Azra is a puzzle game that was released in August of the worst year this decade, 2016. It was made by Onion Core, an indie dev studio from Argentina. I mean, it sounds good. I am a fan of onions. Check my grow up if you don't believe me. But I think they ended up like some of our favorite celebrities in 2016. At least that's what I can tell from their website. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that support has been dropped, but I bought this game at a 90% discount, so I'm sure I can go without a spare dollar if the investment isn't worth it. Our player character is Sam. He's just a regular kid who likes playing with his dog. Mood. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worse when a storm rolls in, his dog falls victim to the Newbury metal, and he's suddenly dragged off to a dark realm to take part in the Trials of Azra. Also, there's this guy in a robe, don't count on him to explain anything. Also, Sam is a necromancer now. He can take control of the dead through the power of T-posing. Okay, but where are all these dead creatures gonna come from? From their own hubris for thinking they could defeat me. They might have had a chance if I didn't have magic spells to attack with. Yeah, that's the point of the game. Kill monsters and use their corpses to solve puzzles. It'd be morbid if I understood the concept of death. Luckily, I understand nothing, and I'm here to have a good time. To start off with, Sam can possess any dead thing. There's no limit to how far the dead thing can go as long as you're in the same room as it. You can only possess one dead thing at a time, and you use various dead things to get through several puzzles that are placed in different sections of this castle. And not to bitch, but for a castle, this is pretty weak. Like, the graphics are fine, the usual indie pixel art style, but the areas themselves are so gray and lifeless. No pun intended. It starts to look a bit nicer once you get to the garden, however, that's the third area, and until then, it's all gray. And they actually had the audacity to make part of the game take place in the sewers. What fucking year is it, man? It just isn't nice to look at, and it makes the beginning of the game feel much less interesting. As for actually playing the game, I had a few issues with the keyboard controls, and I'm not totally sure why. They're completely rebindable, but the default key to possess something is F, which I appreciate. Nothing pays respect to the dead like pressing F and taking over their lifeless body for your own personal gain. You can also play with a controller, which I recommend. Yeah, when I played with the keyboard, I was constantly hitting the wrong thing. Although, that might be a me problem. I'm just saying, don't be surprised if one day it turns out I have a degenerative brain disease that makes me forget the game controls I've already been using for an hour. And while the controller is better, the controls still feel a bit stiff, which does not bode well for platforming. I think I can attribute at least one death to it. And when the necromancer dies, now you just got a bunch of corpses to clean up. As for the puzzles themselves, I found them challenging, but not really clever. Solving them mostly came down to trial and error. Lots of error, which is great because your reward is based on how many times you died. The game does support local co-op, which might make things easier and faster. In co-op, one person controls Sam and the other controls the dead. I had some issues getting it to work. Doesn't really matter, it's not like I had anyone to play with anyway. I'll admit being able to move Sam while he's possessing something is useful though. But yeah, the puzzles never really have any big moments where you figure it all out, they just kinda happen. I think what throws me off is the combat. Yeah, the combat. Let's talk about that. Sam has a basic attack spell and a special attack spell that uses mana. You can use these spells to kill enemies, obviously, but it all feels a bit pointless, as though it wouldn't be any different if each puzzle just started with a bunch of corpses lying around for you to use. The game tries to justify the combat by having some really mediocre boss battles that aren't fun at all. I think it would have been more interesting if instead of combat, the puzzles made you figure out how to kill off enemies in clever ways. Half the monsters have weapons anyway, and if you're a necromancer, shouldn't you be making them do the work for you? Like, instead of running around shooting fireballs, you'd flip a switch to set off a trap to kill a monster with a weapon, and then use that to kill the next enemy that you'd possess, and so on. I'm not a game designer, but I think the puzzles could have been smarter. Well, either way, combat is still a part of the game, so you might as well be good at it. When enemies die, you get a reward in the form of gold. You can then use that gold to buy spells, upgrades, and milk? Yeah, alright. They're sold to you by the robe guy who doesn't explain anything. He also didn't explain that the creatures you possess can harm you because necromancy doesn't disable friendly fire, I guess. And will he ever explain why you were brought here in the first place? I don't know. I didn't finish the game. You see this face that Sam's making? That was my face. It's my face now. I got annoyed and just kinda gave up. The puzzles aren't well designed, and I didn't really get stuck so much as I felt no motivation to continue. Like, yeah, if I'd tried a little bit more, I could have kept going and figured out what the robe guy wanted, but I doubt it'd be some earth-shattering conclusion that brings it all together. I think I've played long enough to know that I don't need to play anymore. In other words,
it was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything.
So yeah, Trials of Azra is a below-average puzzle game, but if you're into necromancy, and I think you are, it's a good introduction to the concept before you actually start messing around with black magic. You know, you gotta work your way up to these things. You start with simulating possessing the dead, move on to roadkill, keep practicing, and before you know it, you'll be taking over entire cities with your army of the undead. Living the dream, am I right? Anyway, that's it for the review, so if you want to see what's next, subscribe, and the next review will be posted soon. I promise. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.